of the times you will be seeing such patients who have crippled severe knee arthritis, but absolutely no pain or manageable pain. And these are definitely not a big difficult diagnosis. They are obvious in the diagnosis. But yes, you have to go in a little bit of deep insights when you manage such patients. So what's a neuropathic joint? It's a Charcot's arthropathy, which is presented by a progressive degeneration and marked bony destruction with extensive resorption of bone periarticular region. And eventually the patients will have absolutely very minimal pain or no pain. Only pain will be because of instability. So gross deformities in the knee without knee pain is all major of the times a neuropathic joint. So coming to the etiological conditions, so diabetic neuropathy, cervical myelopathy, syphilis, hereditary sensory motor neuropathy, lacunar infarct, syringomyelia, and idiopathic. Many of the times you will not be coming to an established etiology of this condition, but definitely you have to look into the details so as to understand the prognosis of this joint. So evaluation of such a patient is very important. Have to have clinical detailed examination of the knee and the entire leg. You always find out for the trophic ulcers in the around the foot region. They may have healed or they may be in an active stage. But the definitive diagnosis requires a synovial biopsy to be taken intraoperatively, which can confirm your diagnosis. Better to take it at every time you're managing such a case. Clinical assessment is very important. Range is usually not a situation because they usually are unstable. They have almost near normal full range. The quadriceps and hamstring function is importantly to be assessed. Documentation of neuropathy is very important. Tactile discrimination, joint position vibration test. You should have this in your armamentarium. You should see their current ambulatory status, for how long this patient has not walked. What is their activity level? Are they really managing themselves? Is there a motivation to walk? So all this is very important. C-spine and lumbar spine assessment is also important. So always do a radiograph of these areas. To come to the classification, these were classified as grossly unstable knee joints by Dr. Mulaji as type 1, which is severe coronal plane deformity, type 2, which is biplanar instability, and type 3, which is a global instability. Radiological assessment can be of two types. One is atrophic and hypertrophic. This usually presents in the foot region, can also be extrapolated to the knee joint. Usually you'll see a complete resorption of the distal femur, and at the times you'll have a hypertrophic bone lying around the posterior capsule region. So neurophysiological studies are also important. You should definitely do a documented reason, because they help for the patient also to understand how that progressive neuropathy is going to evolve in future. Have a detailed dialogue with the patient, understand the patient's mindset, explain him what are the pros and cons of your surgery, and explain him the possible outcomes that he is going to anticipate. Then only these patients are going to have satisfactory outcome. Otherwise, they will always be unhappy. So coming to the TKR principles, so most important thing is these are unstable knees. So as we have seen in earlier also, like TKR in hyperextension or lax knees, minimal bony cuts, posterior capsule plication or minimal posterior release is very important in these situations. And at times you'll have to do transfers of the epicondyles for unstable knees. Playing with the femoral and the tibial components, downsizing them, using augments for your defect management is important. Absolutely no soft tissue release. Do not touch the soft tissues because they are always unstable. You may end up with a thicker poly, and you should always have a constrained backup in your armamentarium. So minimal bony cuts, less than our 9mm standard bony cuts is always important, because otherwise you'll end up a very bigger poly in such situations. So a good extension gap balancing is very important. A minimal cut on the tibia and the femur would lead to a good extension gap, and this has to be extrapolated to a flexion gap as well. So well balanced in extension, that is a springy effect, 2mm in varus valgus stress. Different alignment strategies don't work over here, so always go for a conventional mechanical alignment. So aim to have a perpendicular tibial cut and a 7-degree distal femoral valgus cut, so as to have restored your mechanical access to an output. Bone defects, I'm not going to go, Dr. Manoj has already spoken about it. So defect management, as per the size of the defect and the being contained peripheral or composite defect, you should manage them. Add stems to your implant, or you should always have a constrained backup. Going to a case, this was a bilateral neuropathic joint. If you see the distal femur cut, there's just a sliver of the bone taken from the lateral condyle as well as the medial condyle, keeping the majority of the primary bone intact. Same goes on to the tibial side as well. And we manage this case with a hinge link knee. So usually these knees are done staged manner. Don't do it bilateral at the one go. One unilateral at a time always works well, or a staggered TKR. This is another example of a neuropathic joint. The diagnosis is obvious. This patient is bedridden and not able to walk since more than a year because of instability. Earlier she was managing with braces and all, but now she's not able to walk. So one at a time knee and managed with a constrained implant. You will have complications of tightness of the condyles, avulsions. As the bone is very osteoporotic because of disuse, you will always have chances of periarticular fractures. So if at all you encounter them, you have to be ready with the screws to fix them. A long-term follow-up of this patient, and she's sorry for this video. This is reasonably walking well. So always have to have constant backup. TC3 or LCCK implants are very important. Wedges are important when you are managing your defects, and hinge prosthesis is always majority of times required to manage such cases. So coming on to the literature, there have been a lot of literature published for and against TKR in neuropathic joints. Other surgical option in such patients is to fuse the knee joint, but again the outcomes of fusions are also not very good, as almost 40% of non-union rates are reported for fusions. But incidence of post-operative complications after TKR in such knees is almost as high as 50% complications. Aseptic loosening, infections, periarticular fractures are very importantly noted in such patients. This was another literature by Javed Parwazi, shows that it's not a contraindication for a TKR, but then you have to keep in mind that the perioperative outcomes as well as post-operative outcomes are going to be challenging, and you'll have a tough course of time. So always start with the routine non-complex cases to build up your surgical experience. You should not be too early in your career and only attempt when you are an experienced surgeon. So usually you will be having such a situation, not very often, but occasionally you will manage, be presented with such a cases in your day-to-day practices. It also has its own share of complications. This is a big topic of discussion. I'm not going to go in details. So aseptic loosening and infection and periarticular repeated episodes of instability is definitely reported. So treatment is controversial between fusion and TKR, but yes, you have to judge, have a dialogue, see for thorough clinical assessment, radiological assessment, and then plan of your TKR. Literature shows satisfactory results with total knee replacement. Use of constrained condylar knees and rotating hinge knees is the way to go when you manage your bone defects. Post-operative complications are very high in such patients, and arthrodesis has unpredictable union rates, so I would always urge for TKR in such cases. Thank you.